Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my March reading wrap up. I'm actually filming this video a couple of days early, so technically March hasn't actually ended yet, and I'm going to talk about the book I'm currently reading that I'm expecting to finish as well. But I'm actually going out of the country in a couple of days as I'm filming this, and so I would not get time to film this after the end of March, so I'm filming it now. If you're new here, welcome, but just as a little explanation, I always go through some statistics and also the genre breakdown of the books that I read, just because I like to give you like an overall idea of the books we're going to be talking about. So to start off with the statistics, I read 15 books in March. I actually DNF'd 2 books in March. The first book I DNF'd was actually Close Protection by Eden Victoria. I got this one on NetGalley, and I'm not gonna lie, I only read a couple of chapters, but the amount of times the main female character was calling her dad daddy, and she was just like, she just gave like spoiled brat vibes, and I just could not read it. I knew I wasn't gonna like it, so I did stop reading that one. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are disliking this book. I don't think I've seen anything positive about it, so it's going to be interesting when that one comes out. But the other book I also DNF'd was actually a soft DNF, so I'm planning on going back into this one, but that was The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. I did talk about this more in a couple of reading vlogs. The reason I DNF'd this was purely because I wasn't really in the mood for it when I tried to pick it up. I feel like I tried to sort of rush through it just so I could read it, but I wasn't in the right mindset for a book like that, and I was just like confused the whole time. I did really enjoy the writing from what I understood about it, and I do think I'll enjoy the story, but I just need to read it at the right time, so I did put that one down as well. Hopefully I can read that one very soon and actually enjoy it and give you guys a good rating of it. Out of the 8 books on my TBR, I only read 4 of them, which is still okay, like that's half of them, but I was filming a lot of different vlogs this month and I had to sort of read other books for those vlogs, so I didn't really get time for my TBR books. I read a total of 5,591 pages and my average rating was exactly 4 stars. Now, out of the genres that I read 6 romance books, 6 fantasy/dystopian books, 1 general fiction book, and 2 thriller books. But with all that being said, let's just get into them in absolutely no particular order. Starting off with the first book I read, this one is actually an ARC, but I believe when this video goes out, it will already be out, and that is Summer in the City by Alex Astar. This is like perfect for people that love 2000s rom-com movies. It is following a couple who are fake dating in New York, and they kind of just go through New York and do all of these really cute things together. And literally said this so many times, but I'm going to New York in a couple of weeks, and this was like the perfect book to read before I went because it made me so much more excited to go and more giddy about it. This was honestly so cute. Like, I loved the first half of this book so much. I would say the second half did get a little more boring. I feel like not much was really happening and I was kind of like sick of the characters by then, but I did really love the main female character in this book. I found her to be really relatable, and I really appreciated that about her as well. And considering this is Alex Astar's first contemporary romance, like, she just did such a good job on this, and I feel like the marketing on this book is also really good. Like, I've been seeing her videos in New York where she had like a coffee van, I think, where she was giving out coffees and this book, and it was just so cute, and I wish that I was in New York when that was happening, but unfortunately I wasn't. I did really like this. I actually ended up giving this one 4 stars, but honestly I could almost bump it up to like 4.5. Like, I could not really fault many things about this. The next book I read this for a video actually. I read all of these books for a video. I read books set in cities that I'm traveling to. So obviously the first one was New York. This one is Vegas, and that is The Partner Plot by Christina Forrest. This one I kind of went into with low expectations because I've never seen it before and I've never seen anyone talk about it before, but I really liked this one. It's following a couple who are like young teenagers at the start of the book. I think in the prologue it's like them in high school when they were like together in a relationship, and then I think it was like 10 years later we meet them again. I think they're at like a bar in Vegas or something, and they end up accidentally getting married. Like, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas and all that. This wasn't set in Vegas as much as I was kind of expecting it to. It was maybe the first 50 to 100 pages that were, which for my video that kind of sucked, but that didn't like change my opinion on this book or anything. I think this was really sweet. They actually ended up having a bit of a fake dating situation going on in this because obviously they accidentally got married and then they had to tell everyone, and so they had to like pretend to be together, and then they got real feelings for each other. It was just really cute, and I loved how they had so much history as well. It was like a second chance romance. I actually don't read second chance romances very often because I don't tend to like them, but I did enjoy this one and I gave this one 4 stars. Next book I read, this one was also for that same video. This one is set in LA, and that is Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I feel like when you go into a Taylor Jenkins Reid book, you don't really expect a romance. You have to kind of expect something a little bit different. It's a bit like Emily Henry, where like it's not just just a romance. There's like more emotional aspects to it as well, and that's exactly how I felt about this book. This one is following Hannah, and she honestly just feels a bit stuck in life. She's lived in like so many different cities, and at the start of this book she actually moves back to her home city, which is LA. She ends up meeting her high school boyfriend in a bar as well. Funnily enough, it's very similar to the partner plot, and there is like actually two timelines in this book. So at the beginning it's one timeline until this specific event happens, and it kind of splits off, like chapter by chapter is a different storyline, if that makes sense. So in one storyline she's in hospital severely injured because of an accident that happened, and she's kind of like in a relationship with a doctor at the hospital as well, like they've got something sparking up there. And then in the other timeline she's sort of in a relationship with her high school sweetheart. So we're following two different storylines. It's a bit of a love triangle, but it's not a love triangle because it's not happening at the same time, if that makes sense. I don't want to spoil anything, but I really like the way this ended. I feel like it was very much up to interpretation in a way. But yeah, that's all I kind of want to say on that. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Honestly, cannot fault anything about Taylor Jenkins Reid books. Then I read two books from the same series, which I'm sure so many people read this month as well. I read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This was the last book that I had to read, obviously, before Sunrise on the Reaping came out, which I'll talk about next. This was honestly my least favorite in the series. I would say the movie is probably not one of my favorites either. I love the first half of this book and the movie, but I feel like in both the movie and the book, the second half is just so boring and nothing really happens. And I get that that's kind of the point of it, to see where Coriolanus and Lucy Gray's relationship sort of goes, I guess. But I just found myself getting really bored towards the end of this book, honestly, and I ended up giving it 3 stars, even though I do think it's very important to read and relevant to the whole story and universe as a whole. But then I went on to Sunrise on the Reaping, obviously, which is the new release. It's also Haymitch's story, which is following the 50th Hunger Games, so the second Quarter Quell. I actually had no idea about anything about his games. I know that it's like mentioned in other books, but like I never like think of details like that, and I know that you can find things online about his games, but literally went into it blind. I don't want to say much about this either because I don't want to spoil anything, but first of all, the way he was reaped, some of the characters mentioned, like I just cannot believe all of the Easter eggs in this book. I cannot believe how things happened in this book. I really just wasn't expecting anything, and I think this book was so perfect. I read it the day it came out. I read the whole thing in one sitting because I just had to see sort of where it was going to end, and the ending absolutely broke me. Like I was sobbing by the end of this book for obvious reasons. If you've read it, I'm sure a lot of you have. It was just perfect. Like I think that is my second favorite in the series. I have sort of spoken about my ranking in another video, I think. Still would say Catching Fire is my favorite, but Sunrise on the Reaping is up there. Like it was almost as good as Catching Fire in my opinion. So that was actually my only 5-star read of the month. The next book I read, this was technically a 5-star read as well, but this one was actually a reread, so I wouldn't really count it. I reread The Crimson Moth by Kristen Cicerelli because obviously the second one has come out now and I haven't gotten to it yet. I was planning on it, but haven't gotten around to it because I've just been so busy preparing for this trip and everything. But anyway, I feel like everyone sort of already knows this book now. It is a romantasy following a witch hunter and the Crimson Moth, who is like this really famous witch. It is like literally cat and mouse. It's very sort of like, it's got like the Regency sort of vibe to it as well. There's like all of these like high up parties and everything. I just love Rune's character. I love the way this book ends, and I did forget so many details in this book. I'm so glad I reread it before the second book came out. Probably going to read it when I get back from my trip because I did annotate this and I'm not taking any like physical books with me, and I do want to annotate the second one as well. So hopefully I get to it in April, but we will see. Next book I read was My Policeman by Bethan Roberts. This was one of the books on my TBR, and I actually listened to this one as an audiobook because otherwise I don't think I would have gotten to it. This one really pleasantly surprised me, honestly. I kind of went into this one with low expectations as well because I was like, this is not something that I usually read. It's not something that I would necessarily enjoy, but I actually did. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It is following a policeman named Tom, and this is sort of like a love triangle. So this is set in the 1950s, and at this time, obviously sort of like gay marriages and relationships like that were very looked down upon. And Tom was in a relationship with Marion, like that was like who he was married to and sort of like in a relationship with to the public, but he was also in a relationship with a man called Patrick. And so it's kind of like a love triangle. They're like all living together. It's kind of just like following their day-to-day lives. Like I would say it's like almost mundane in a way, but like I really enjoyed it because of that. And it was really sad and emotional at the same time, just like knowing the things that they were going through and kind of being in their heads during this book as well. So yeah, I would actually recommend this, and I I still do want to watch the movie as well. I know that Tom in the movie is actually Harry Styles, so I was imagining him during this whole book as Harry Styles. Next book I read was Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. This was my Fable Book Club's pick for March actually, and I kind of went into this one with zero expectations. I didn't know what to expect out of this. I didn't even really know what it was about, but it is considered a dark fantasy romance book. It's kind of like Games in a way, so it's kind of like Caraval sort of vibes, but like darker than Caraval. So they're like invited to this game called Phantasma, and it says at the back of the book, just to like give an explanation, it's a deadly contest inside a haunted mansion, and its one prize is to get a single wish at the end of it. Ophelia, our main character, actually goes there because she thinks that her sister's in the game. Her sister just goes missing one day, and so she joins Phantasma to try to find her sister within the games. She ends up having a relationship with a man in this book called Blackwell, and I found the relationship to be a little weird, I'm not gonna lie. The first half of this book really had me. I loved the plot, I loved what was going on, and I loved our main female character because she was suffering like severe anxiety and OCD. So there's like some mental health representation in here as well, which I always appreciate in a book. But during the second half of this book, I just feel like it got like very overly spicy, and I openly talk about how much I don't like spice in books, but it doesn't stop me reading a book. It doesn't like change my ratings of a book or anything like that, but I just feel like this was like too spicy to the point where it was taking away from the plot and the story, if that makes any sense. So I did like kind of think this was going to be a 5-star read at the beginning, and then I ended up giving this one at 3.75 stars. Still excited to see where the second book goes though. I think it's coming out very soon, but I have like no idea where it's gonna go. The next book I read was The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore. I did listen to this one as an audiobook as well. This one is following Jeannie, and her aunt ends up passing her down this cafe that's set in a small town, and everyone in this small town has been waiting for this cafe to like reopen because her auntie had owned it for years, but then kind of like had to shut down, I think. And so Jeannie has to like take it upon herself to like reinvent this cafe and open it back up, and you know, all of that fun stuff. At the same time, she is like experiencing all these like creepy things happening. Like she thinks that there's like someone breaking into her house, and she keeps hearing all these things at night, and she ends up camping out with this boy from the town who has so much history with the town as well. This is like very much reminiscent of Gilmore Girls. Honestly, this very much reminded me of Lorelai and Luke, if the roles were like reversed though, because obviously like Luke owns the diner in that, and then in this book Jeannie owned the coffee store. But anyway, that's not important. Very much just like a cozy little romance. It was like very cringy at times, but I still ate it up, and I listened to the audiobook in a couple of days. I also gave this one 3.75 stars. Then I read one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and that was Wild Side by Elsie Silver. I'm not gonna lie, this one was actually very disappointing. I had really high expectations for this one, and even when I first went into it, like the first like 100 maybe 200 pages, I was like really loving this. It is following a girl called Tabitha, and after her sister passes away, she wants to get custody of her sister's son Milo, but her sister was actually living on this property with a man called Reese in like a little house on his property, and he somehow ends up getting custody of Tabitha's sister's son, if that makes any sense. This is like so confusing to explain. She hates him for this at the beginning because obviously she wants the best for her son. She wants to protect him and look after him and everything like that, and take him back to where she lives. And so they actually end up getting married. It's like the marriage of convenience trope, so they can both have custody of this boy. And I really liked the idea of that because I don't think I've actually ever read that trope before, and so it was kind of new to me. But that being said, like, as I said, the first 50% of this book I really enjoyed. I feel like there was so much going on, and I loved the characters and sort of where they were like developing to. But then in the second half, I feel like it just didn't really go anywhere. Like, it was very disappointing. That's all I can really say. I have seen a lot of people agree with that though and say that they were disappointed, so I don't think it's really a favorite from Elsie Silver, but I still did like enjoy it. It just wasn't the best, so I gave it 3 stars. Next one I read was Heir of Fire by Sarah J Maas. This is the 4th book in the Throne of Glass series, so I finally continued my journey into this series. I had heard a lot of people say that this was either their favorite in the series or least favorite. It's kind of like there's no in between, like you either love it or hate it. And honestly, I was a little bit disappointed by this one because I just found myself getting bored throughout this book quite a lot. There was like quite a few point of views in this book as well, and it was getting a little bit hard to keep track of. I don't know if it kind of continues like that throughout the rest, but that was something sort of new in this book, I think. I just feel like there was like so many different plot lines storylines going on at the same time that, again, it was just getting very confusing. One thing about Sarah J Maas for me is that I just feel like her writing is like overly detailed sometimes, and so it takes me out of the story because I'm like reading a sentence and I'm like, there's like 10 different words to describe what's going on here. Like, it's kind of just taking me out of it. And so I do struggle to get into her books like every time I read them, but I'm still excited to like continue this series and see where it ends up going and everything like that. I think the next book, Queen of Shadows, is like a lot of people's favorites. Like, I feel like no one talks badly about that one, so I am very excited to get to that one and see how I think of the series. Now, before I go on to the 2 books that I read on my Kindle, I wanted to talk about my current read quickly, which is A Dance of Lies by Brittany Arena. This one is actually an ARC. It is absolutely stunning. Like, when I saw this, I just started it straight away. When it came to my front door, I was like, I am not waiting. Like, that looks amazing, and it looks like Once Upon a Broken Heart, so I need to read it. I don't have a rating for this one yet, but I can give you guys a little synopsis on what it's about and sort of like my predicted rating, I guess, which is kind of fun. So for reference, I'm up to page 121, so I think I'm probably almost like 30% through the book. It is following a girl called Vasali, and she was like a famous dancer within the king's court. And the king actually ends up accusing her of murder or framing her for murder. I can't actually remember which one of the two it is, but she ends up getting wrongfully locked up for a couple of years, and until she makes a deal with him a couple of years later that she needs to become his spy at this like royal gathering that's happening for a month, she will not be let out. But if she does become his spy, she will be let go. She will get her freedom back. I think the writing in this book is really, really beautiful. I do think that I'm really, really gonna love this as well. I am finding it to be a little bit overly detailed at some points as well, but that being said, I'm really not that far into it, so I feel like the plot will get more heavy towards the end. I've got no idea what to expect out of this, but as I said, the writing is really, really beautiful. It's very poetic, and so I am loving this so far. Now on to the 3 books that I read on my Kindle. Sorry, I thought it was 2, but it's actually 3. The first one was All the Missing Pieces by Catherine Cowles. I actually did read this one in a vlog. I read most of my books in vlogs now, but I did rave about this one in the vlog quite a lot, so if you guys have seen that, you would have already heard me talk about this book. But this one is actually a romance with like a heavy subplot of like a mystery slash thriller. So this one is following this famous podcaster who kind of covers like true crime cases, and the reason why she does it is because her sister went missing years ago, and she thinks that her case is linked to a case in this small town that she's visiting. And in this small town, the case that she's actually visiting is a woman who was kidnapped, but she ended up getting away, and so she can actually speak to the victim. The victim also has a brother, so that's who the relationship is with. He like hates her at the beginning. He's so unsure about her because he thinks that she's just there for like fame, and he doesn't actually know her like personal reasons for being there. But this one was really, really good. I just like wanted to read this whole thing in one sitting because I wanted to see where it was going to go. The relationship just also felt so real and so raw because the characters were going through things that were very emotional, and I kind of understood why they were acting in specific ways. So I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. Then I read Keep It in the Family by John Mars. This is just a thriller that I read on Kindle Unlimited. I gave this one 4 stars. I actually quite enjoyed this one. It is following a new husband and wife who buy this home and they are planning on renovating it. But when they go into the attic, they notice that there's like this wall that's been put up that shouldn't really be there. And so they actually decide to knock it down, which that seems kind of unsafe, but they do it anyway. They find these suitcases behind the wall, and within the suitcases there is actually all of these bodies, and they are the bodies of many children. So I feel like this book is very, very dark. It's very heavy. It's got some very heavy topics in it. But because of this and because of what they found, there is like a whole police investigation throughout this book, and we also get, I think, like 4 point of views. We get the point of view of the husband and wife, and also both of the husband's parents, and also an anonymous point of view, I think. So there's like 5 point of views in this book, and I feel like that's what made it really easy to read because you just wanted to keep going, and each chapter kind of ended on like a cliffhanger in a way, so literally could not stop reading until you found out what happened at the end. That's another one that I read in one sitting and I would highly recommend. And the last book I read was another thriller. I did get this one through NetGalley, so this one is not out yet, but this one is called Someone Knows by V. Keeland. It says that this one's coming out on the 17th of June, but definitely add it to like your TBR list because it was so good. I actually also gave this one 4 stars. I feel like it's so hard for me to rate a thriller book badly. Like, unless I really hate the ending, I feel like I generally like them quite a lot. This one is following an English professor at a university, and one day she gets emailed from a student and it's like a few chapters of a manuscript, and she realizes that the manuscript that she's been sent is actually something that happened in her life when she was younger. It was about her best friend murdering her teacher, and so she's like, how does this person know? Like, we all promised not to tell anyone. And she's just like going through her head thinking like, did I tell someone? Like, did one of my best friends tell someone? Like, she's just like literally going crazy. And so she starts investigating who this student is, and that's all I can really say, I guess. I don't really want to spoil anything about this, but it was so good. It was so well put together. I would say that it's a very unreliable narrator sort of book as well. I really did not like the main female character. I found her to be quite annoying, but I did really enjoy the story, and as I said, it came together so perfectly at the end. So I did give that one 4 stars. Would highly recommend. But yeah, that was the last book that I read in March. I feel like I actually had a really good reading month. Compared to February, I literally did not read many books in February and didn't really enjoy many of the books that I read. I feel like this is so much better. I got through so many books and loved quite a few of them as well. As usual, I really hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope I gave you some recommendations. I hope I put some new books on your radar. Let me know what your favorite read of March was as well that you read, because I would love to know. I'd love to get some more recommendations for myself. But with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in my next one.